Sunny spells otherwise, and into Sunday plenty more sunny spells to come, just the odd shower, and warming up as well by Monday.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Lots coming up this hour. We'll be talking about GCSE results day with grades down on last year but still inflated above pre-COVID levels. We'll also be talking about Boris Johnson's legacy in Ukraine after the outgoing Prime Minister was presented with the highest award given to a foreign national in that country. All that but plus much more after your latest headlines with Rihanna.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Police have said they will not rest until they find the gunman that killed 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool on Monday. In a press conference, Merseyside detectives also confirmed they've identified a second man involved in the fatal shooting. They say he was with the 35-year-old who was shot. The gunman remains at large despite pleas from officers for his surrender. Detective Chief Superintendent Mark Carmine says the force is working around the clock to find Olivia's killer.
I asked for the man responsible for this brutal, callous, thoughtless attack to surrender himself to the police. Unfortunately, that individual has failed to do that. But my message to him remains the same. We will not rest until we find you, and we will find you.
Well, in that press conference, Merseyside Police also confirmed the arrest of a man and a woman following another fatal shooting in Liverpool. Council worker Ashley Dale was found with gunshot wounds in her back garden in the Old Swan neighbourhood on Sunday. The GCSE pass rate this year has fallen since last summer, but does remain above pre-pandemic levels. The number of top grades is also down from last year, but higher than in 2019. Students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are receiving their GCSE results today after sitting exams in person for the first time in 3 years. More than 100,000 Royal Mail workers will walk out tomorrow in a dispute over pay. The Communication Workers Union says its members want what they call a proper pay rise after they rejected a 2% offer. Customers are being advised to post items as early as possible ahead of the walkout. More strikes are planned for later in the month. British Gas has announced it'll donate 10% of its energy supply profits to help customers cope with soaring bills. Its parent company, Centrica, says some customers could expect grants of up to £750. It comes ahead of the next energy price cap set to be announced tomorrow. Some are forecasting a typical annual energy bill of up to £3,500. Will Hodson, consumer champion at How to Save It, told GB News he expects the price cap to go up even more.
What we're expecting to happen is there's going to be an announcement that the price cap is going to rise from where we are now, just under £2,000, up to about £3,600. Where we are is in a state of complete reliance on very, very expensive gas, and that applies at a national level, where we've got it in our fuel mix. And it also applies, in our homes, in our businesses, where we're using so much of it.
The number of commercial vehicles produced in the UK increased by 44% last month. According to industry data, more than 8,000 were produced in July. These include vans, lorries and coaches. It's the highest figure since 2016 and represents 11 consecutive months of growth. The UK's last fertiliser plant is to halt production. The decision's led to concerns about the availability of carbon dioxide for the food and drink industry. CO2 is a byproduct of fertiliser production and is used for slaughtering animals and in the production of beer. One of the UK's biggest producers of CO2 has decided to temporarily freeze its production of ammonia due to soaring energy costs. Brewers and meat producers have warned it will have a knock-on effect with their operations. The Texas police chief tasked with protecting schools at Uvalde has been fired more than 3 months after the mass shooting that killed 19 children and 2 teachers. Pete Arredondo's termination was voted on unanimously by the Texas School Board last night. He was criticised for his lack of leadership after reports that it took officers more than 77 minutes to storm the school and stop the gunman. GB News understands 60% of people arriving in the UK on small boats that have crossed the Channel come from Albania. It comes as the British and Albanian governments reach a new agreement which will allow for the faster removal of those attempting to enter the UK. The deal will see senior Albanian law enforcement officials based in the UK to help identify those with no legitimate claim for asylum. GB News has been told that around 6,000 Albanians have crossed the Channel so far this year. And Britain will offer technical expertise to Ukraine as part of a new support package to help the country rebuild its infrastructure. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says British experts will share technical knowledge in building airports, runways and the reconstruction of ports. Engineers from a number of UK companies such as Rolls-Royce and Heathrow Airport will also help. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Tom with the briefing.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Briefing this afternoon with me, Tom Harwood. We've got lots coming up this hour on the show. We'll be talking about GCSE results in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, with grades awarded to students down on last year, but of course remaining inflated, higher than pre-COVID levels. We'll also be discussing Boris Johnson and his legacy in Ukraine, after he was presented with the highest award that can be given to any foreign national in that country. And we'll be talking about bank holiday travel chaos after it was announced that more than 900 flights have been cancelled between Friday and Tuesday. And as ever, I want to hear your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions on all of the stories we discuss by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. Now, first today, many Albanians arriving in the United Kingdom on small boats will be rapidly removed back to their own country after the Home Secretary has signed a fast-track agreement with her Albanian counterpart. It comes as GB News has learned that an incredible 60% of those currently arriving across the Channel are from the tiny nation of less than 3 million people on the Balkan Peninsula. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now in the studio by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. And I'm struggling to get my head around the sheer scale of this. 60% of these numbers, and we saw earlier this week on a single day over 1,000 people came across on small boats. 60% of them coming from this tiny country of Albania.
Yeah, when you think about all the countries around the world that are impoverished, that might have wars raging or at least conflicts that people are fleeing from, and then 60% of the ones who are arriving claiming to be refugees are actually from Albania. It's a peaceful nation. It has been for more than 2 decades now and is suffering its own existential crisis now because it's suffering from rapid depopulation, 15% drop in the population in just a couple of decades, and the rural communities in particular. Young people are just upping sticks, leaving that country, and of course many of them, as we know now, coming to the UK. We've got some figures that can put perhaps a bit of sobering context into what we're seeing out in the Channel. So 23,500 people have arrived in small boats so far this year. Now that compares, of course, to 28,500 for the whole of last year. And it's actually even more than 23,500, Tom, because they're arriving all the time. Just in the last few hours, hundreds more have arrived. It's up about 23,800. And 60% of that, according to what we've been told, of those arriving currently are from Albania. And it's been that case really since about July time. And that means that so far this year, more than 6,000 people who have crossed the English Channel are Albanians. But as I say, the figures are changing all the time because with every boat that comes, the likelihood is the majority on that boat are from Albania. Now, just to give that some context, just 2 years ago in 2020, only 50 people who were pulled off small boats in the Channel were from Albania.
So this could really be driving this enormous increase that we've seen, because we know, of course, this year so many more people have come than from previous years. It's so curious, though, that this is from Albania. The British Empire never ruled Albania. It's not a country that has many links or familial connections to the United Kingdom. Now, a lot of people argue that the reason why a lot of people try and come to the United Kingdom rather than France or Germany or other countries, rich countries in Europe, is because they have family connections to the United Kingdom, because through the legacy of empire or anything else, people want to come to the mother country to some extent. That can't be true of Albania.
No, quite simply, the driver here is crime, in the sense that I'm not saying all those coming want to take part in criminal activities, but actually the drivers in terms of attracting people are the organised criminal gangs. Determined and ruthless Albanian criminal gangs are starting to take over much of the people smuggling operation on the other side of the Channel, and they are advertising back in their home country for fellow Albanians that want to come to the UK to come at knock-down discount rates on these small boats for a new life in the UK. They're doing that quite blatantly on social media apps like TikTok. And in fact, today, as part of what the government is doing to try to push back, there is going to be an advertising campaign on social media in Albania, for instance, in Albanian, telling people not to believe what the organised criminal gangs are telling them, that in all likelihood, if they come here, they'll be returned. Well, if they're returned, it may be some time. Part of what we've got today is what we're told will be a rapid return of people through a fast-track programme. That is at least the ambition of both the British and the Albanian governments, who've signed what amounts to really an emergency agreement to deal with this crisis within a crisis, Tom. And so they'll be assessed, these people, and then hopefully within 2 to 3 weeks, the plan is to get them on a plane. But nothing is ever straightforward, and we know that the lawyers will challenge many of these refusals if that's what is the outcome.
It's going to be incredibly difficult because we've seen so many government plans in this area come up against activist lawyers beforehand. We've seen so much in this context be overruled by international law, by other treaties. This agreement between the United Kingdom and Albania will take the status of an international treaty. It's two countries signing an agreement together. Would that have the possibility to supersede those rules as long as we can determine the nationals that come here are legitimately Albanian? There shouldn't be any barriers.
Well, there shouldn't be, but we just know because of the way in which the legal system works that lawyers who are representing their clients in this field, human rights lawyers, immigration lawyers, know exactly what levers to pull, what avenues to explore in terms of trying to secure the best possible outcome for their clients. And that would be, of course, to be able to remain in the UK. One thing we should say about, we often hear from the human rights lawyers and the charities that we are demonising those who are coming across small boats by describing them as illegal migrants, or the government describes them as illegal entrants into the UK, because they say the vast majority, 3/4 or more, are granted asylum. So that proves that they can't be the criminals that they are being branded as. But actually, that is misrepresenting what is happening, because we've been told that actually since the small boat crisis began in 2018, 85% of those who've claimed asylum since then have still not had decisions on their asylum claims. So we don't know whether they'll be, in the fullness of time, granted asylum or not. It's false to claim.
So that majority number is just of those who have been granted, and perhaps they're the easiest ones and the rest are stuck in limbo, especially if they're coming from a country like Albania.
Yes, absolutely.
It's hard to make that case.
Or throughout the whole asylum process, then, are high numbers of those who granted asylum that have come in other routes will actually then be accepted and given asylum. But given that only 15% or thereabouts of those who've come since 2018 have actually had a decision, you can't extrapolate and say that the majority, as they are doing, of those coming across are legitimate because they're getting asylum.
A fascinating and multifaceted story there. Mark White, thank you so much for bringing us that latest information. Really extraordinary numbers there. 60% coming from one little country. Well, it's a huge day for students in England, Wales and Northern Ireland today, of course, as they receive their GCSE results after being warned to prepare for some disappointment. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody was with students earlier, opening their results. Let's take a look.
Like 7s, 8s and 9s, upper kind of A stars, A grades. I got all 9s apart from 1. I got 9 9s and an 8.
Excellent. Congratulations. Congratulations. How do you feel?
I'm speechless.
Better than you anticipated. Congratulations. So what do you think you'll go on and do now?
Well, I got to do my A-levels first, but hopefully... I can't believe it. I actually can't believe it.
What are you hoping to get?
Honestly, I'm just hoping to pass, if I'm being honest. I've had a very tough year, if I'm going to be honest, so I didn't actually expect to do my GCSEs this year. I got an 8 in English language, an 8 in English literature, a 9 in history, a 7 in maths, 8 in geography, a 9 in religious studies, a 7 in biology, a 6 in chemistry, a 6 in physics and a 6 in Spanish.
So not only have you passed them all, you've done really, really well.
Thank you so much.
Are you pleased?
Yeah, I am actually really pleased. I never expected this.
Oh, congratulations, that's fantastic news.
Well, it's really heartwarming to see scenes like that, and just to help convert those peculiar numbers to people who did their exams in old money, a 9 is a very good grade. It's like a super A star, an 8 is like an A star, and a 7 is like an A. we don't really want to talk about what a 1 is equivalent to. But grades awarded to students are down from last year, of course, because last year had that superinflation of teacher assessment. But grades overall remain higher than pre-COVID levels, with grading lenient to reflect pandemic recovery. Well, joining me to discuss these results is the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, Chris McGovern. Chris, thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I suppose one big question that comes out of today is, yes, of course, so many students will be delighted with their grades today. Many more students today will be delighted with their grades than before COVID times. Is that necessarily a good thing, that we still have this level of grade inflation in our system?
Well, you're right to point out to the fact there's great inflation. These youngsters can only do the exam put in front of them, so they've done well. Congratulations to them. But when GCSE started, about 8% got the top grade, the A grade. Now it's about 3 or 4 times higher than that. So, of course, we've got grade inflation in the system, and I don't think that was reflected in the international league table. When we look at our performance internationally, we find we've gone backwards. So according to the GCSE and A-level results, we've made phenomenal progress Tony Blair talked about earlier in the week. But actually, when you look at international comparisons, particularly from what's called the OECD, the international number crunchers, we've actually gone backwards in the last 20 years. So there's a disparity between the performance we're seeing in terms of the GCSE and A-level results and the performance was being seen in terms of international data. So a problem for politicians, really. I think we have to be honest and say, these kids have done well, they've done as well as they can do, but the examination has got inflation built into it.
I wonder how much of the problem that we're now seeing is due to simply COVID, simply missing school, and it being very hard to try and make up for that, to try and even out all of those losses that we've seen over the last 2 years. Or how much is structural to do with our education system dating back before COVID? I mean, I can't help but notice that the education systems in the United Kingdom are almost helpfully devolved, and we can see a difference in terms of standards and improvements between England and Scotland and Northern Ireland and the rest of it. And since 2010, England has improved, whereas Scotland has got worse. What can we learn from that?
Well, Scotland's is a basket case and it's getting worse. England has improved slightly, but as I say, on international data, it's not doing particularly well. Is it to do with teaching methods? I think you have to say yes. I mean, the majority of staff in schools these days are not teachers. They're administrators and classroom assistants, which is quite extraordinary. And we've increased expenditure on education between 1953 and 2010 by 900% in real terms. But all we ever hear from the media is what's happened since 2010. There's no direct relationship between expenditure and performance. Vietnam, for example, a very poor country, does far better than we do. Estonia in the European Union, miles better than we do. They spend much less. We need to ask ourselves, how is it that the education system in England is so expensive and yet it doesn't produce particularly good results if you measure that on international standards? It's a very difficult day for us campaigning for real education, because we know the truth and themselves want to know the truth, but actually we don't want to dampen their enthusiasm. They've done well, they've done all they can do, but actually the truth is that internationally we're not doing well. And a few years ago, the BBC, in fact, took cameras to South Korea and they gave a GCSE maths exam to the South Korean 15-year-olds, which they did in 20 minutes. And they said, well, we did that in primary school. So, we should really be sitting GCSEs at the age 14 rather than 16. And then we'd only be a year behind the likes of Singapore and South Korea and Shanghai. So there are real problems in our education system. And today, of course, we've seen a big gulf between London and other parts of the country. But believe me, the gulf between London and Shanghai is much greater. The children of street cleaners in Shanghai are outperforming the children mostly in the best of our London schools too. So we've got a mountain to climb. We've got to face up to that. The only person I've seen speaking about this on the political front was Kemi Badenoch, when she actually did say, there are issues about how we teach the children and where the money's going. So there may be some hope there.
Well, interesting you mentioned Kemi Badenoch, because the papers over the last couple of days have been tipping her as a potential education secretary in a Liz Truss administration. That would be a fascinating turn-up for the books. Really interesting stuff there. But for now, Chris McGovern of the Campaign for Real Education, appreciate your time this afternoon on GCSE Results Day. Now, coming up on the briefing, I will be joined by a political analyst to discuss Boris Johnson's legacy in Ukraine after the outgoing Prime Minister was presented with their highest honour, the Order of Liberty. Don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, yesterday, Boris Johnson visited the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv for the third time as Prime Minister to mark the country's Independence Day. Of course, it was his latest visit to Ukraine since Russia's invasion began 6 months ago. And as well as announcing another £54 million military support package, he was also presented with the Order of Liberty, which is Ukraine's highest honour that can be given to foreign nationals. Well, joining me now to discuss the visit and the legacy that Boris Johnson will be leaving in Ukraine is political analyst specialising in Eastern Europe, Samantha D. Bendon. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today. A lot of people in the United Kingdom find it hard to get their heads around just what a cult figure Boris Johnson appears to be in Ukraine, the streets that have been named after him, the fact that the National Rail Company of Ukraine changed their logo on social media to add a mop of blonde hair the day that Boris Johnson was ousted as Prime Minister. How deep does the feeling go within Ukraine that Boris Johnson is someone who is really, truly an ally and a friend?
It goes very deep indeed. I mean, apart from all these things you've mentioned, they've created a croissant in Kiev, which is the Boris Johnson croissant with an egg yolk on top. When he had his birthday, people in Ukraine were celebrating Johnson's birthday. I don't think anyone in the UK even knew it was his birthday. So he's become a cult figure. There are Ukrainian media personalities who are even talking about the fact that Boris Johnson could theoretically maybe even be Ukrainian Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister one day. There have been other foreign politicians who've been awarded these kind of honours in Ukraine. The former president of Georgia was the governor of Odessa. So he's really seen as the saviour. And there's a lot of symbolism here. He reminds them of Churchill. But it goes further than Johnson. Whenever I meet Ukrainians and tell them that I'm British, they just go, oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you for helping us. They all, of course, mention Johnson, but it goes a lot further than that. They really feel there's a bond that's been created between the UK and Ukraine since the beginning of the war.
Unique to Boris Johnson as an individual, or would this have been hoisted upon whoever was the British Prime Minister? Of course, Britain has been helping Ukraine since 2014, has been training Ukrainian troops after that initial invasion by Vladimir Putin and the annexation of Crimea. Britain was the first country to send weapons within Europe to Ukraine to help them defend themselves before this full-scale invasion by the Russians. Is there something individual and special about Boris Johnson, perhaps his bombastic media personality and very recognisable image, or would this have been bestowed to any individual?
I think it's very clearly related to Johnson and his image, as you've said. The fact that Boris Johnson had visited Ukraine 3 times, the way he's spoken to Ukrainian people. This war is a very media-savvy war. The Ukrainians have conquered the media with this war, and Johnson knows how to work the media as well. He knows how to talk in public. So with Johnson and Zelensky, in a way, you've got two fantastic actors, and I'm not undermining it by saying this, the genuineness of their feelings on that, but they are both very clever at talking to crowds, and the combination of the two created a very special chemistry. A lot of Ukrainians are now wondering who is going to replace Johnson. A lot of them seem to prefer Liz Truss for some reason. So there are questions, there are fears that the UK's support will diminish, and no matter how much one can try and explain to them this is not just about Johnson. This is a very British thing. Perhaps it's the fact that we have this memory of having stood up to tyrants before in history, the memory of the Second World War. Ukrainians do very much see this as being part and parcel of Boris Johnson himself. So I think his personality has definitely contributed. The things that people don't like about him in the UK are things that they love about him in Ukraine.
Fascinating that you mentioned the UK Conservative Party leadership contest and what people in Ukraine make of it. Leaning more towards Liz Truss, perhaps because she's simply been more visible as Foreign Secretary, but perhaps because the Russians seem to hate her the most. And potentially that's something that makes Ukrainian people think, well, that's probably quite a good facet to have. How closely are they paying attention to this leadership contest?
They're paying very close attention to it. Ukrainian media talks a lot about it. They compare sort of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. They know Liz Truss, she's a familiar person. They wonder whether she'll be another Margaret Thatcher, because Thatcher is also revered in Ukraine. They absolutely adore Margaret Thatcher. So I think all British politicians who no longer have any kind of following in the UK should all go to Ukraine, because they seem to love them all. So they see her as another Thatcher. They like the fact that she's a woman. All that goes part and parcel with the image. They don't know who Rishi Sunak is. He's an unknown quantity for them. They are concerned that he might be more focused on the economy and therefore perhaps less inclined to help Ukraine continue its fight and continue arming Ukraine. So British politics have become a focus point in Ukraine in a very bizarre way.
That's really, really interesting. Now, of course, you're not just an expert on Ukraine, but also the region more widely. And I keep seeing these videos pop up on social media of what Russian state media makes of the United Kingdom. It seems that the Russian state media, and particularly a debate programme that they have on their #1 channel, makes special mention of Boris Johnson, makes special mention of London, wanting to bomb London, wanting to nuke the United Kingdom, more than just about any other country in the world. The Russian media seems to hate the United Kingdom more than just about any other country in the world. Is that something that they extend especially to Boris Johnson?
Well, yes and no. I mean, they do hate the United Kingdom now. There are a number of reasons for this. I think that Putin and his entourage were very surprised by the forceful way in which the UK has supported Ukraine, particularly considering the UK's recent history with Russia, when we have our capital city is called Londongrad by many people. We've opened our arms to Russian money for decades, and all of a sudden there's this switch. Boris Johnson himself was very, very close to a number of senior Russians, and so there's, I think, a lot of anger that this safe haven for their money has suddenly turned against them. But also the British have been very, very vociferous and very forceful in their support for Ukraine. And there's a lot of emotion in the way Johnson talks about Ukraine, much more so than the Americans. And so the UK is seen as the bed of all evils. And yes, there have been clips on Russian television in which they simulate bomb attacks on London. They simulate torpedoes creating a radioactive tsunami over the UK, and also talking about bombing London more so than any other country, which is again not something I think anyone should take too seriously. It's part of the showmanship of these programs. It's their way of expressing their displeasure. I think that we should really reassure viewers that we are not about to be nuked by the Russians any day soon.
For this country and how it stands up for freedom and democracy in the world. Well, Samantha de Brendan, thank you so much for discussing through really interesting issues there and how the United Kingdom and its leaders are perceived overseas. Thank you very much. Well, coming up on the briefing, we'll be talking about the energy price cap, which will be announced tomorrow, the new level of it, as well as a bank holiday of travel chaos with 900 flights cancelled. But first, it's your news update with Rhiannon.
Tom, thank you. Good afternoon. It's coming up to 3:34 in the afternoon. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Police have said they will not rest until they find the gunman that killed 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool on Monday. Merseyside detectives have also confirmed they've identified a second man involved in the shooting. They say he was with the 35-year-old suspected target. The gunman remains at large despite pleas from officers for his surrender. Detective Chief Superintendent Mark Carmine says the force is working around the clock to find Olivia's killer.
I asked for the man responsible for this brutal, callous, thoughtless attack to surrender himself to the police. Unfortunately, that individual has failed to do that. But my message to him remains the same. We will not rest until we find you, and we will find you.
The GCSE pass rate this year has fallen since 2021, but does remain above pre-pandemic levels. The number of top grades is also down from last year, but higher than in 2019. Students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are receiving their GCSE results today after sitting exams in person for the first time in 3 years. And Britain will offer technical expertise to Ukraine as part of a new support package to help the country rebuild its infrastructure. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says British experts will share technical knowledge in building airports, runways and a reconstruction of ports. Engineers from a number of UK companies like Rolls-Royce and Heathrow Airport will also help. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy $1.182 and €1.184. The price of gold currently stands at £1,485.77 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Now, turning to that tragic killing of the 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel. The police say they now have a number of positive lines of inquiry. So let's cross now to our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, who has the very latest for us. Sophie.
Well, there have been 3 gun-related murders in Liverpool in the last week alone. And today, Detective Chief Superintendent Mark Cameen gave us an update on each of them in turn. First, he told us about the case of Sam Rimmer, who was shot dead in Dingle on the 16th of August. 3 men were arrested on suspicion of murder, but they've since been released on bail. Inquiries continue, and police would like to know the person responsible and where the gun used now is. They moved on to the case of Ashley Dale, who was killed on the 21st of August in Old Swan. A man and woman have been arrested, the man on suspicion of murder and the woman on suspicion of assisting an offender. Inquiries are continuing into those 2 individuals. Police also confirmed they still believe Ashley was not the intended target in this attack. Finally, they moved on to the case of Olivia Pratt-Korbel, the 9-year-old schoolgirl who was shot dead here in Dovecot on the 22nd of August. Now, as you said, the police have said they've got a number of positive lines of inquiry that are now being investigated. Yesterday, they arrested 35-year-old burglar who was the original target of the gunman, Joseph Nee. He remains in hospital, but they also told us that once his treatment was complete, he would be returning to prison. They also find the other man. They've now found the other man who was being chased by the gunman. And finally, they told us that they've spoken to the owner of a black Audi Q3. That was the vehicle that took Joseph Nee to hospital after he'd been shot twice. They've told us that they now have the car and that it will be searched. And Merseyside police over the last few days have carried out a series of raids and made a series of arrests, and that's part of a crackdown on serious crime in the region. They told us that they're baring their teeth and that they want to see guns removed from the streets of Liverpool. as these murder investigations continue, police have said that the response from the local community has been significant, but they still want anyone with any information in any of these three cases to come forward as soon as possible so they can find the people behind these heinous crimes.
Really, really important message to end on there, Sophie. Yes, if anyone has any information at all, let's expedite these investigations, although they seem to be moving fairly quickly. Sophie Reaper there, thank you very much for that latest update from Liverpool. Now, tomorrow, the new energy price cap will be announced, with the cost of living crisis set to intensify further as we approach the autumn months. The cap, which is meant to protect customers from short-term price spikes, the new one will come into effect from October the 1st. Well, joining me now is Senior Research Fellow at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimston. Malcolm, a lot of people are very confused when they hear the words price cap and then hear the words that the bills are going to be soaring up anyway. Is it about time that politicians scrap the cap altogether?
I mean, it was designed because, in effect, the market didn't work terribly well. Many people didn't switch from one supplier to another and could quite often get caught on the most expensive tariff rather than shopping around. So to protect those customers, the price cap was introduced. It was still a level where companies could make money, which is will stabilise the market. But it did mean it was a bit of extra help for those who weren't very confident in shopping around. It becomes a totally different thing, of course, if the raw costs, the costs of the gas in particular, and the other sources of energy that we're using, go through the roof. At that point, the cap becomes something which is in effect the price in the market. It's not a cap anymore. You can't get anything below the price cap in the marketplace. And at that point, it's
get him back. But it's a fascinating and important point about this price cap. It's not working as a cap, it's almost working as the set price, as a price that the government has set, that there is no movement around. I think another really important point around this price cap, and indeed the energy situation, is that this is a situation whereby the energy companies are not the energy suppliers. In effect, they're the middlemen. They're not making a lot of money. 30 energy companies have gone out of business in the last year. 30 put out of business by this energy price cap. Of course, they have to buy their energy on international markets. And as we know, international markets have meant that price of energy has soared and soared. Well, we'll have to get Malcolm Grimston back at another time, but we can move back to the issue of Ukraine now, as in the last couple of hours, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has announced a historic pact with that country that commits to sharing engineering expertise and pledges a new package of support to help rebuild its damaged infrastructure. Shapps hosted a virtual meeting with his counterpart at the Ministry of Infrastructure in the same week Ukraine marked its Independence Day and 6 months since Putin's invasion of their country. Let's take a look at what he had to say earlier today.
So I'd spoken to my opposite number, Alexander Kuprikov, right on the first day of this war when Putin invaded. And we promised that we would carry on supporting. 6 months in, it seems like the appropriate time to put an action plan in place to think about the reconstruction of Ukraine. But not just that, and there are over 300 bridges, for example, destroyed, 25,000 kilometres of railway damaged. But it's not just that, it's also how to help them during the war as well, so the short-term reconstruction. So we've been working on this for some time, pulling together this action plan that we've been able to announce and formally sign today. This agreement with the Ukrainians means that we will step up and it really puts some detail on some of the pledges that we've made previously. Yes, it's both, because what we'll do, for example, is provide them with expertise, some equipment as well. There are containers headed their way to fix roads, fix bridges, fix the railway lines. And we've seen, just yesterday, that Putin thought nothing of bombing Ukrainian train station. Reports say 22 to 25 people have died. That is people's lives. It's also the infrastructure that is helping to service that region. So this deal will help with the short-term things, fixing bridges, helping with supply chain problems, and helps the rest of the world as well, because things like Ukraine grain exports can be assisted. But also thinking through the longer term as well, where we've already been working in close cooperation with, for example, to get some of the big British contractors in to help with the rebuild of the country. And since we know that nearly $100 billion, dollars rather, of damage has been done in Ukraine, there's plenty of reconstruction work to be done. Mm-hmm. Well, look, I think the whole country, the whole of our country, has sort of found something in common with what's happened in Ukraine. People either remember, if they're elderly, or at least have heard about the Blitz and how the country withstood that. And I think we feel a lot of compassion for what's going on in Ukraine. So having a Ukrainian family was a decision that we took very early on. Actually, they've been with us for more than 4 months now, I think. So they've lived with us for a long time, and their story and seeing how they're settling in, and the child's gone to school and learning English and all of those different things, of course makes it very real. But I think I feel the same way as most Brits do about this. Freedom isn't free. There's a cost to helping others defend their own territory. We're seeing it in the energy prices that we're all having to pay. But we know that the alternative, doing nothing, allowing a dictator to run riot, is not a future for Europe. It's been there in the past, and we can't see it go back again. Well, I think it's important for the whole country that we do this, and it's clearly not something which is going to be fixed quickly. We're 6 months into this war now, I don't think it's revealing anything you won't realise to appreciate it will probably still be going on in another 6 months, and the reconstruction, in any case, for years to come. So it's a massive project, and I do think it's really important that we carry on with it, come what may. One of the things I think is very reassuring, regardless of who wins the leadership contest and becomes the next Prime Minister, is we will have a Prime Minister who is absolutely every bit as committed as Boris Johnson has been to Ukraine, because both the candidates have made clear Ukraine defending freedom is absolutely at the core of what they believe, and it will be of their administration in number 10 as well.
Do you think you'll still be here next month?
Look, I don't know exactly what will happen. I'll leave that to the next Prime Minister. What I do know is support for the Ukrainian people will still be here next month, and that I can guarantee.
Transport Secretary Grant Shapps speaking a little bit earlier today. Well, of course, tied into the issue of Ukraine is the energy issue we face here at home. The Prime Minister himself explicitly blaming Vladimir Putin for our energy crisis yesterday, speaking in Kiev. Let's return to the Senior Research Fellow at Imperial College, Malcolm Grimston. We've got you back up and running. And Malcolm, I wonder now, moving this conversation forward to the energy crisis, these international prices that we are beset by, what is the solution here? Is there anything in the short term that can be done to alleviate this crisis?
In the short term, the main thing that can be done is to reduce energy demand. We can do that in the home. There are a number of measures, the simple ones like switching down the temperature of the central heating, or switching up the temperature of air conditioning if we're using that in the summer. And just being more mindful of when we're using energy. Businesses will be looking afresh at possible ways of reducing their energy demand. But one of the problems with energy is it's a long-term business. There's very few sources of energy that you can turn on very quickly. Even the fracking revolution in the States took really 5 years to really become established, and they had all of the basic science done at that stage. So we should have been doing this a long time ago. We weren't. I hope one of the lessons out of this is not just to deal with the short-term crisis, but really start investing now for the long-term future, so we don't find ourselves repeatedly in this sort of situation.
And this week we learned finally that the government has approved approved the funding for a new nuclear power station. I suppose that has to be part of the mix. But how long is this all going to take? In our final 30 seconds of conversation, Malcolm Grimston, it's got to be a bit of everything.
Yes, certainly. We need new sources of gas. We need to look at renewables, which are already contributing. We need a variety of sources.
Well, Malcolm Grimston, thank you so much for joining us here on The Briefing. Always really, really important to get your insight there. Malcolm Grimston of Imperial College, of course. Well, people have been warned of traffic chaos over the bank holiday weekend as millions of cars take to the roads. There's an amber traffic warning being issued ahead of an estimated 15 million trips taking place this weekend. But it's not only the roads that will see a turbulent few days. More than 900 flights have been scrapped between Friday and Tuesday as airlines wrestle with higher demand for travel and chronic staff shortages. Well, joining me to discuss the story further is the CEO of the PC agency, Paul Charles. And Paul, I suppose a lot of people will be thinking, why on earth did these airlines bother booking these 900 flights if there was a chance they couldn't run them?
Well, the airlines, of course, thought that the flights would be going, that everything would be pretty well back to normal, certainly by this busy summer period, the busiest for 3 years, of course. But it's the ground handlers and the airports who have not been able to find enough staff or pay well enough to attract those who are needed to help these flights get off the ground. The number of planes available isn't the issue, it's the people to get the planes off the ground. And so whilst the airlines have managed to recruit, actually a lot of the airports and the ground handlers who handle our baggage or some of our check-in services, they haven't been able to get enough people, and that's where the problem lies.
Remember talking about this issue a few months ago, which was saying that it takes about 6 months to get the security clearances through for people that want to work in airports. So it's a real tricky issue. You can't just get in some agency workers or whatever. It's about retaining staff as much as trying to recruit new people, because that takes so much time. Are we set now for another few months of airport chaos?
It's a really good question. I think we are now seeing a new normal where the airlines are having to, under pressure from the airports, cap the number of flights that they're operating. So they're operating at around 20% fewer flights than they were in the August bank holiday in 2019. And it's astonishing that we're seeing post-COVID, when the industry should be recovering well, such a fall in the number of flights operating. And that is because of staff shortages primarily. It's also because the processing of security passes, as you say, is not speedy enough. It's not fast enough to get fresh people into the industry. It is getting better. But as you can see, with 20% fewer flights, that just shows you how far the industry's got to go to try and get back to normal. Of course, the airlines are in a position now where they're adapting and they're becoming more profitable again. So they're recruiting fewer people. They're seeing the profitability go up, even though they're flying 20% fewer flights. And that's why I think this is the new normal for the future that we're going to have to get used to.
Now, in our final 30 seconds, what can individuals do? What can people hoping to get away over the next month or two do to try and make sure that their journey is as smooth as it's possible to be?
If you've got a flight already booked, especially for the busy August bank holiday, then keep an eye on your emails and your phone in case your airline's trying to get hold of you, should there be any last-minute cancellation. But crucially, look out for the sales, actually, that are going to start after the August bank holiday. Airlines are determined to keep filling the flights, and if you're looking to fly in the next 3 months, you'll pretty well pick up some good deals, because the prices aren't all sky high. Some of them are being lowered due to the sales. So you have to be fleet of foot and do your research.
Well, really, really useful information there. Paul Charles, CEO of the PC agency, thanks so much for joining us here on The Briefing this afternoon. Well, that's it from me. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. I'm back every weekday morning from 9:30. Every weekday, apart from tomorrow, that is, because tomorrow I'm taking a day off. It's my birthday. So I'll see you all on Monday, but up next here on GB News is the wonderful Patrick Christie's. After the weather.
Hello, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Following the wet start to the day in the southeast, it's now turning drier and clearer in many places. A cooler night to come, and then some showers turning up in the west later because of another little feature coming in from the Atlantic. But it's this cold front, and just ahead of the cold front, that has caused some heavy and thundery rain in the southeast and across East Anglia early in the day. That's moving out of the way through the evening. Cloud eventually clearing, and then with the lengthy clear spells for England and Wales, A much fresher night to come, more comfortable for sleeping, but cloud thickens for Scotland, for Northern Ireland, for West Wales and eventually western parts of England, with some showery rain turning up here. For most, temperatures will dip to 10 to 13 Celsius. I think in some sheltered spots with clear skies, we'll see the single figures first thing Friday, but plenty of sunshine through central and eastern England, a very different start to the day in the southeast. Northern Scotland also faring well for sunny spells, but a cloudy zone for central and eastern Scotland into much of western England and Wales. Parts of Northern Ireland also seeing that cloud and some showery rain where we've got the cloud. Temperatures mostly around average, high teens, low 20s in the north, low to mid 20s further south, but the showers could really perk up by the end of the afternoon across southern Scotland, the far northwest of England. Some heavy downpours for a time before they move away to the east, and then clear spells developing for many overnight once again. And quite a cool start to the weekend for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Single figures fairly widely away from urban centres. Further south, a bit milder, but a lot of cloud around first thing Saturday, I think, in many spots. There will be further showers here and there, primarily down the spine of England and into parts of East Wales. Sunny spells otherwise. And into Sunday, plenty more sunny spells to come, just the odd shower, and warming up as well by Monday.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it